Okay, so today I am with the Josoman for a discussion slash debate slash general chat about politics, feminism, social justice, Trump, anything that is sort of covered by either of us on our respective channels and outlets. So it ought to be interesting and it will be entertaining, hopefully. So take it away, Josoman. Where do you want to start?
I guess we could talk about feminism. Is
Go
it
right
on?
ahead.
It's saying it's off air.
Sorry?
It says it's off air.
What says it's unfair?
No, off air.
Well, it says live on
Oh no, it
my
is.
screen, and the
It's just a
stream
glitch on
started.
my end. It's just a glitch on my end, apparently.
Okay, no
But
problem
yeah,
then. So take it away, feminism.
I mean, support anyone's right to be a feminist. I'm just not. I'm more of an egalitarian, but because I focus more on men's and women's, but I understand fighting for women's rights. So
But with egalitarianism, it's quite a broad sort of encompassing ideology, but sort of encompasses all of human existence. And feminism is one branch, but naturally falls under egalitarianism. It just focuses on gender more than, say, like egalitarianism does as a whole. And I think in a world that has inequalities and has a system which sadly represents discrimination towards women in varying forms, it's important to focus on the fact that women are treated worse than men on average and in numerous ways. And so we need to focus on that. Otherwise, we end up sort of losing the whole drive behind the movement. And it's important to distinguish that, yeah, women are treated worse in many ways compared to men. And a nice, neat word to sort of describe the movement is feminism. And that's still part of egalitarianism, but it's like more precise, it's more focused.
I guess you're right.
So you would like you could see yourself calling yourself a feminist if you were willing to accept my point there.
Yeah.
Oh, really? You like just like that?
Well, you know, I guess you could make a convincing argument. So I don't. I hate to be like that just to agree with you, because you're looking for. Well, maybe you're not looking for a debate, but more of a discussion.
Oh no, 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 not at all. Like I'm thrilled if you sort of see my like viewpoint as correct. But just I thought you would say more. But no, it's fine. I mean, I'm glad that you can sort of see what I'm saying. Really, it's just there's no need to like feminists are egalitarians by nature, essentially. So it's like why avoid using the word? There's nothing like bad about it. It's a good thing. So anyway, that was quick. Um, is there like another sort of discussion area you wanted to go with?
I guess. I guess religion. What is your views on religion? I know you're an atheist, but what's your views on it?
In terms of what? Like, in terms of how I feel about it as a whole, or in
How
terms
you
of
feel about it?
okay, well, yeah, like you said, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God or anything, but I feel as though there's some like good motifs in religion. Like, there's some good ideas about morality and stuff. And for people who want to think, oh well, there's a higher power and we should all be good to one another. Whilst I disagree with the higher power bit, I think it's great that people have the mindset of being nice to their fellow citizens and fellow people around them. And that is, if you actually sort of listen to what some of the teachings are meant to sort of say, that's the whole concept, the idea of being nice to each other, because everyone is sort of special in their own way, and it's important to be a good person, be a good neighbor. And naturally, I feel as though there's sort of an overlap between morality as a whole and some of the religious morals. And whilst I'm not religious myself, but I don't think it's sort of nice to just sort of mock religion just for the sake of it, because at the end of the day, a lot of religion is just trying to sort of understand the world a different way and like be nice to people and stuff. Where I dislike religion is where it starts to infringe on these sorts of the sciences, the influencing politics and stuff. So, like for instance, like you look at how the church in the past, in certainly in Europe, has dictated a lot of what goes on in society. So sort of held back science massively, and certainly in America, you could say that it continues to hold back science today, and continues to hold back education today. That's where it's a negative. Um, but in terms of as a whole, if you look at like the way Jesus conducts himself, that sort of Christianity, that's definitely something that is a positive. So, I mean, religion really just, it's not something that is portrayed accurately. And whilst I'm not religious, I feel as though there's a lot of chagrin where it doesn't need to be against it.
Yeah, I have no problem with religious people just as long as they don't infringe on other people's rights.
Well, I mean, exactly. But, I think that certainly in the case of like Muslims, for instance, they are their religion is sort of used to sort of discriminate against them a lot. So like people say, "Oh, you're a Muslim, you believe X, Y, Z, you're horrible," and that's when it sort of becomes a problem because lots of people are like, "Oh, well, it's just a religion, it's not a race," um, and it sort of ignores the fact that these people don't have the problem with Christians who have the same views as the stereotypical Muslims they're portraying, who actually exist in the legislative powers and offices of their own country. Yeah, obviously aim their focus on Muslims. Like, for instance, you see lots of people saying, "Oh, Muslims hate gay people; they're so dangerous," um, and then they'll say nothing of the right-wing conservative Christians who exist in the government, in the Republican Party, who are actively signing legislation against LGBT plus groups and against trans people and against like the sort of concepts they're having to go at Muslims who did nothing wrong for. Um, so religion and government is always going to be a contentious issue, and it's important to keep society secular. Like, definitely, you don't want religious fundamentalists um, sort of dictating laws. But I think part of the real problem with religion comes from capitalism, because you see sort of traditional like institutions who have not changed their sort of view of the world in centuries, having massive power within the religion. So, for instance, in the Middle East, it's why so many nations have such like backwards laws. All these old traditionalist institutions with rules that clearly do not meet modern morals and moral standards, being able to sort of influence an entire religion. Same thing in the West with Christianity, like groups like the Republican Party, like in this country, the Conservative Party. These groups have heavily right-wing Christian views of the world. They have such like backwards views, like anti-abortion, anti-same-sex marriage, even like anti-race mixing in some cases. And they have the power because they have the wealth, and they have the wealth because capitalism is a system that allows people who are wealthy to maintain colossal power in society. And if you address that, if you remove the power these groups have, suddenly the violent nature of elements of religion um, are much lessened, and you don't have the for instance, like Muslims in the Middle East having to like do a lot to not be indoctrinated by far right Muslims, like Christians going to churches that teach them hateful, like awful ideas. Instead, you get teaching closer to what the sort of actual reflections of what their religions were supposed to sort of convey. Say, so I know I've gone on a bit long, but I think capitalism is the sort of toxicating factor with religion, and without discussing capitalism, you don't really solve or recognize the real sort of problems with religion in the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, there's this movie out there, you might have heard of it, that is basically hateful towards atheists. Have you heard of it?
What's the film called?
God's Not Dead.
Yeah, of course, I've seen it. Hilarious. It's just a bit of a mess. I mean, um, it's like ridiculous, but like I said, like they're like you've got the people who made that film, they made millions of it. They're wealthy people who can afford to just sort of pump money into these projects, which to us may look laughable because it's like portraying atheists as these like delusional like psychopaths, basically. Like I'm pretty sure, like I mean, I've seen reviews of it and stuff, and I've seen the film, like, and it's the way they're portrayed in it are like these stone cold, like no nonsense people who just like what's the scene like the professor like chases down the student, like puts his hands on his shoulder. Right, if you think you're bigger than me, yeah, you got another thing coming, basically. Like, and it's like it's a joke. Like, obviously that's not what real life is like. But then if you've got the wealth and the power to exert this view over people, you're going to influence them, whether like facts or science can prove you wrong, like regardless. It doesn't matter how correct you are. It only matters how wealthy you are. And because organizations like the ones who made God's Not Dead have like so much power and so much wealth and exist in all sort of walks in the system, they can really easily continue their message, even centuries after their ideas were proven wrong, and centuries after their sort of worldview was seen as negative.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, because their negative view towards atheists is kind of harmful, but that's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, seeing atheists as like I don't know, heretics essentially is what these like sort of far right, quite militantly Christian groups do see them as, and militant Islamic groups as well, I suppose. Um, Certainly, like you see the ideas perpetuated by them as a threat to sort of a stable society. Because like if you're saying you must agree with our religion, otherwise you're like a heretic, that's bad. And sort of some of the themes in God's Not Dead too, like the idea that atheists like had a tragedy happen to them, which is why they believe in God. Like I think the professor who was the main antagonist of the film, it turns out his mum died of cancer, so that's why he became an atheist, which isn't even atheism, because if he doesn't like, if he still believes in God but he hates him, how is he an atheist? Because atheism is not believing in God. It's like none of it makes sense. But um, like I said, like with a system like capitalism, which allows people who are wealthy to essentially do what they want and influence society far more than those on the bottom, a wealthy conservative religious group with fundamentalist ideals, no matter how rubbish, can still have a massive stain on society today.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I yeah. I used to be for socialism, but I'm not for or against socialism. I'm not for capitalism either. I'm just kind of neutral on both.
What makes you say that?
Well, I feel like while capitalism has worked, another system could work better, but I don't know if socialism has worked in other countries. So,
Why has what makes you say capitalism has worked?
well, the way that we have how technology with capitalism has improved. So
But do you
that's
think
one.
that? Sorry, were you saying something?
But I don't know if with socialism what it improved as well. Who knows? But as a
Well, quite a few points there. I suppose we can elaborate on. Whilst it is true that society, in terms of technology and life expectancy, has improved, would you attribute this to capitalism itself, the distribution, I think, sort of the private ownership of production, the sort of profiting of other people's labour? Would you say that improved the standards in society, or would you say it was different things, like, for instance, just innovations independent of the system? Obviously, capitalism was the system in place, but would you attribute it to capitalism? Because I would say that if we had a different system for the last few centuries, we'd actually be further ahead than where we are now. We'd be in a position where, because everyone has the opportunity to innovate and inspire and use technology, we actually have more productivity in society and thus can be further ahead than where we are now. So when you have a society like we do today, where wealth is controlled by the few on top and compared instead of by everyone, by the workers as a collective, it's the ideas and the views of those on top who that essentially make it. The other ideas don't matter because they're not coming from wealthy people. So, for instance, you look at internet technology and like iPhones and stuff and phones. Yeah, a phone is a very good piece of technology, but firstly, the labor used to create it is all through exploitation and through essentially like disgraceful ideas. Like you look at sweatshops in Southeast Asia. I mentioned this yesterday, in fact, on a different stream. But you look at the way these Western corporations can just go to Southeast Asia and other regions across that, the third world, employ workers on dismal wages, make a massive profit, and then obviously they've got their product to sell in the West. And that's the sort of cost that capitalism has had. So instead of a society where everyone has a good life, some people have a very good life, like a few people on top, and then the rest sort of get by ish, but lots of people don't. It's a bit of a struggle. And then away from the West, you've got really dismal conditions a lot of the time because of Western capitalism. But coming back to what I was saying, sort of more directly, the idea that capitalism was the reason we are in the position we're in now is, I think, a bit of a misconception. Whilst capitalism was the system we had, you can't attribute the efforts of people under a system to the system itself. Like, for instance, Albert Einstein, one of science's greatest minds, he was not a capitalist at all. He's a socialist. He didn't believe in the ideas of capitalism. Yet, would you attribute his works to capitalism? Would you say, oh, capitalism made him able to succeed as a person? In fact, the idea that profit should be the main incentive of life and should be anything can become a commodity and be profited off is actively harmful, because you see improvements to the world that could be made ignored because wealthy corporations and wealthy individuals would rather see their profits increase, which is why, for instance, we're still seeing fossil fuels being used en masse. Because corporations and wealthy oil companies, they're not going to relinquish their power. They want to keep their money coming. So they're actively not investing or even trying to improve because profit is more important to them than actually improving the system. And you can also sort of say, why not? Because under capitalism, profits are always going to be more important. So I would, sorry to sort of ramble, but I would say that actually capitalism it's not the cause of society being ahead of where it was years ago. And had we had a better system in capitalism for the past 100 or so years, we'd actually be further ahead than where we are now. We wouldn't be facing a growing far right and countless economic disasters. We wouldn't be facing environmental catastrophe, potentially. Anyway, sorry to go on for so long. I'll let you reply.
I guess if the new system would be better, it's just has to make sure to work. Like, I think.
Josh.
Oh, sorry. I have to take my meds real quick, but I'll answer it real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, if the new system, maybe we'll test this new system out, and if it improves significantly, we'll test it out bigger and bigger, and would that be a good?
So, what?
All right, I have to go check it out.
All right, then. I guess Josh has been called by someone. But to answer your question, a very dead horse. I think we were meant to be having a discussion about politics and other stuff. It's not really a centered debate as I was sort of anticipating. It's a bit of a discussion, really. I'm not too sure. Don't get the impression Josoman is particularly expecting a sort of rigorous debate, and neither was I really, but more of a sort of a discussion. Hello to you two, S-Man and some random geek. And to answer your question, S-Man, Owen, what do you think of anti-theism? A little bit silly, I guess. I don't think we should actively oppose religion. It's more the way we see religion that should be criticized and stuff. So for instance, seeing religion as integral to someone's life is negative, but seeing religion as negative inherently isn't great. If people want to believe that religion is how they want to live their life, then go for it. You believe what you want to believe, and really, life is too short to be sort of saying no, you're wrong. Every little thing. If you're not harming anyone and you want to believe that there's an afterlife and there's a God that's going to reward you if you live a good life, then yeah, go for it. Essentially. But in terms of just actively opposing religion for the sake of it, I feel as though it's just a little bit self-righteous and a bit silly. You're just essentially saying, "Oh, I'm better than you because I believe in this thing," whilst you don't. Some random geek. Pineapple and pizza, yeah, no, absolutely. I love pineapple. And I think it's one of the better toppings on pizza, to be honest. Like, I don't see why so many people abhor it because it's pretty tasty. Um, Not sure when Josh is going to get back. To answer your question, or sort of statement, really, a very dead horse. Yeah, sure, we can organise a debate. My Twitter, I'm pretty sure you follow me on Twitter, so you'll be able to DM me, and we can organise it from there.
Well, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Oh no, no worries, Josh. Take it away.
All right. Base. Did you make an argument, or sorry, I missed that.
Did you or do you have a response to what I said like prior to you leaving?
Oh, well, yeah.
Which I can remind you of it if you
I
want.
think I would. That I would like to say how it. I don't know if this was before that, but if you want to say they were exploited, well, if they're paid, like I'm not talking about the sweatshop workers, I'm just talking about the everyday worker. Are they being exploited by capitalism?
Well, if you're being profited off, then yes, I would describe that as exploitation because your work is being taken, and then someone else is getting your rewards of your work instead of despite not putting what you put in. So imagine if you and like 10 of your friends made a car, and then I paid you to make that car, but paid you less than what the car is worth, and then sold the car for much more than what you got. Like, I've profited off of your labor despite me not doing anything, and that isn't fair. That's the situation that workers face, and no corporation or no company pays workers what they put in. Which essentially, are you still there? Or
Sorry, my dog started fighting, so I had to.
no worries. Anyway, what I was saying. So yeah, workers have their labour profited off, which is exploitation, and then there's no because lots of people say in response to that, oh, they don't really agree to it, they don't choose to, but it's not a real agreement. It's essentially the conditions capitalist society hands people is if you do not agree to have your labour profited off, you'll have no money and you will starve. So essentially, any worker has to agree or is forced into agreeing to have their labour profited off because if they don't, they'll have no means of surviving. And obviously, no one's going to starve and die over being paid fine. We're not being paid the full amount that their labour is worth, but it's something. And that's the situation every worker faces. That's why I would describe any situation that a worker is being profited of as exploitation because you're taking someone else's work and profiting of it. You're making yourself better off despite not doing anything else. And that is the sort of problem with capitalism. And yeah, fine. Do we compare, you can say, oh, well, we're not being as exploited as sweatshop workers and people in different parts of the world. And yeah, fair enough. In some parts of the world, exploitation is much worse. In Qatar and the Middle East, there's people essentially to get a passports taken off them, forced to work on these massive construction products. And yeah, that's worse than what we see in the West. But it doesn't mean that it's not exploitation. It doesn't mean that it's not negative. And every single transaction and consumption under capitalism is part of that exploitative chain. Any product that is made really is contained this exploitation. Like a computer has parts built all around the world, has minerals used, mined by workers paid nothing, has parts shipped across the oceans by workers who don't see any of the profit and the wealth generated at the other end. Apple and Microsoft and all the companies like that, they are worth billions. And the workers who make it possible don't get a fraction of the wealth. They barely even get anything. They get enough to eat, and that's it. Meanwhile, the person who did nothing, the shareholders, the people right at the top, they get billions and they have a comfortable life off the labor of everyone else. That isn't fair. That is essentially one person or a few people on top profiting off the work of everyone else underneath them. And there's no reason for it but for capitalism. And that's why capitalism needs to be replaced. And that's also why I sort of think that to attribute successes of society to capitalism is unfair and not accurate to the reality of the situation, which I would say, in spite of capitalism, we are here. Because if you look at history, capitalism has been sort of responsible and the ideology behind capitalism has been responsible for some of the most disgusting things imaginable, like slavery, for instance. People saw slavery as a very effective way of making capitalism more profitable. Seeing black people as a commodity and a tool to make profits out of was widely considered a good argument for slavery. So, for instance, you see so in the 1800s, Southern business owners saying, "Oh, well, my business is thriving because we have this effective slavery rule, so we don't have to pay our labourers anything. We provide them with on farm shelters and stuff, and like beyond that, they're just like a tool to be profited off." Um, and that is something that's come from capitalism, and it was anti-capitalism, and the idea that no, people are not a commodity, that was one of the driving factors in ending sort of those ideas. So yeah, to come to a more finite point, capitalism is antithetical to the productivity and success of society, and the successes of capitalism we see today are not successes. They're not. You can't attribute the successes of society to capitalism today. And you were saying something about exploitation, and I said exploited workers who are profited off are always exploited under capitalism. And there is no transaction or consumption under capitalism that is ethical. Anyway, sorry to sort of expunge that massive diatribe of words. You need to speak now.
Okay. I guess to address some of it, I guess one thing, yeah, um I guess the business provides the workers the payment for the work, and they and they also provide the tools that people use every day. So if you are paid well enough, they um they're able to live off that. And I don't know. I guess I was rambling, so sorry.
No worries. I mean, I suppose you can't really. I can't say anything about rambling, given I just spent like 5 minutes speaking. Um, but to address that argument, firstly, the fact that business is paying the workers is not a sign of a business being ethical. In fact, the business is paying those workers out of the money generated from the workers in the first place. So, if anything, the workers are not being paid what they are, which should be getting. Their work has been profited off by the business, and then in return, the business is handing them like a paltry fee. Um, the tools the business is using, like those tools were constructed or built or used by the workers. So again, it's more labor that has been profited off by the business and then not met with an equal return for the workers. And like to argue that oh well, capitalism allows businesses to thrive and lets workers have jobs. Like these jobs will still exist under socialism, and given there's automation, and lots of jobs won't be needed in the future because we'll have machines which are more than capable of replacing workers in a more efficient and safer way. Like you're going to have a problem because suddenly where are people going to sell their labor hours to work? Where's capitalism going to provide people with the opportunities to work when it's more efficient to use machines? And that's why not only is change sort of coming anyway, but it is needed. um, but to go back what you said, businesses paying their workers um, is not a sign of non-exploitation or non-negatives, because a business is paying their workers out of money the workers made in the first place. It's essentially the business is keeping more of the money than what they actually generated themselves, and the workers who did the work are not getting that money. Like I said, the shareholders of Apple or Microsoft or Sony, any of the massive TNCs that have sort of presidents in the world, their money it would not be there were it not for the work of workers across the world. If you don't have the workers constructing the phone and shipping it and delivering it to the stores and selling it in the store and operating the phone lines and every single component that is necessary to have the product, there's no product itself. But then the people who did the work receive nothing, or next to nothing. Receive enough to eat and maybe enough to pay rent, or not even that. So they end up trapped in a factory accommodation center Um, and it's gross. It shows that capitalism relies and needs exploitation to varying degrees and massive exploitation um, in parts of the world where it's like not as frowned upon to sort of treat your workers like cogs um, to thrive. So no, I would say that the fact businesses pay their workers is not a sign that capitalism is unexploitative, and in fact, even more of a sign actually that capitalism is exploitative because the amount of workers are being paid is not at all um, equivalent to the amount workers produce themselves and what workers actually do.
All right. You done?
Yeah. You can respond.
I guess I would respond with, well, how is the business going to thrive if they pay the workers the exact same as their profit they're earning earning.
So you think that the only way a business or a group can thrive is if workers are being profited off and there's no fair um, value for workers to hold.
Well, I mean, if they're paying the workers the same thing as, let me try to explain it. If it takes if they're paying the workers the exact same money that it takes that they're making, then how's the business gonna make any money because all the money that they're making is being paid to the workers.
But this again comes from the idea of making money is not like all profit comes from the expense of someone else. If you profit off something or someone, you have exploited someone else for your own benefit. That's sort of the whole point of profit. It's a capitalist idea, which is a negative one because it relies on someone else being negatively affected for your own benefit. And the idea of making money is one that isn't actually necessary for people to function. It's just something capitalism has sort of added in. Um, and it's like not a good thing. Like money should not be something that you make off the expense of others. And certainly the idea that a business like needs to exploit its workers to survive is one that's not actually true. Like there's no reason every worker who does work should be missing out on the produce and the fruits of their labor. Um, I mean, it's a common question that people have for communism, really, and socialism and other far left ideas that people who how his business is going to make money, and it's not one that has that complex an answer. It's simply like you don't need to make money under like far left ideologies. You don't need to be profiting off other people's expense because all of a sudden you don't have that potential like death knell that capitalism has. Like under capitalism, if you're not selling your labor hours, if you're not making money, you're not earning a wage, you're as good as dead because you're not going to have any food, you're not going to be able to pay rent, you're not going to have any of that. Whereas under better systems, suddenly you don't need to be in a situation where your life is at stake, your livelihood is like potentially under threat. So you don't actually need to be profiting off other people. You don't need to be competing with your neighbor to like survive. And subsequently, like laborers and people who are working can be paid their actual like return of their labor. They don't need to be profited off. And the business isn't gonna like fail because all of a sudden like you don't need to have that colossal wealth to be on top. You don't need to worry about like being outpriced and out sort of crushed by wealthy competitors because no one has the like supreme power that we see in a capitalist economy where like entities can rake up massive like billions and like essentially whittle down the market so there's only really a few wealthy corporations and entities that can compete, which is sort of the case in like areas with urbanized, like a few corporations, a few companies sort of own everything. And yeah, fine, maybe on the street level, like you get lots of different shop names, but then you see who owns those shops and go up and up and up. And really, it's a few corporations right at the top that own all of them. Certainly, that's the case. Like for instance, with TV networks, it's like five massive corporations which own like lots of little nation networks underneath. So yeah, maybe there's like 900 channels on a cable package, but those 900 channels are owned by like five. When you go up to see who owns the label. But to cut a long story short, a business that requires profit to succeed is one that requires exploitation of workers to succeed. And in reality, a transaction, an operation, a system that does not exploit its workers to thrive and survive and let people sort of adapt and cope is one that is better because all of a sudden you don't need exploitation and suffering on the bottom to have success on the top. As no one suffers, the actual productivity of your system can increase as everyone has a potential part to play and no one has to suffer for the success of others. Again, I've gone on for quite a while, but you can have you can say something.
I guess I really don't have much to say because I was trying to figure out something to refute that, but
I mean, to be fair, I sort of covered quite a lot of ground there. I feel as though I might have drifted a little bit off topic. I mean, I think you've been suggesting all these sort of areas. I think I guess I could say something more directly. You're obviously in America. You're an American, and I think one only has to look at the state of America to sort of give an like to show how capitalism is sort of a pretty shoddy system. Like you look at your healthcare, for instance, the state that people end up in simply to survive without healthcare, because healthcare costs so much in America, is disgraceful. What would you say to that?
like I think healthcare should be free. Like I think it's right, but if that's what you're asking me,
So
like
you think that healthcare should be like it shouldn't be a capitalized economy?
yeah, I don't think
It to be socialized.
in that instance, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But why
That's
why stop
definitely.
why stop at healthcare? Like, if you can see that everyone should have the right to be like healthy without having to pay, why should it be different for other things like education or transportation or like having a home?
Well, I guess transportation and the other and education should be alright, but I don't know. I guess if you're renting a home and buying a home, you should. It's not right there, but everything else I agree with you there.
But no, I'm asking like why though? Because like if you can recognize that it's not fair for someone to just like fall ill and then just have to die because they can't afford to pay, why is that different than for other stuff? Like with having a home, for instance, if you're born poor, like, or if you're born without much money, and certainly in this economy, that's essentially like most people, you're not going to be able to buy a property. So you're going to have no home and forever sort of be trapped in the poverty cycle of like having to rent out places, not having much money, not having much food, like, living on a livable wage even. Um, when
Yeah.
people on top have essentially the control to do what they like. How is that something you're justifying? But then you see that as different for healthcare. Like I don't see how like both are the well-being and livelihoods of human beings, of people, but somehow it's okay for healthcare to be socialized, but then you disagree with like just homing and residence and stuff.
Um. Well. Well, I guess it's the fact that I guess with a home, it's something that you have to put in time with, and I don't know. I can I hear your argument again, and maybe I can think of something.
Yeah, sure. Um, so with healthcare, it's good to see that you can recognize that no one should just be born into a situation or just no one should just have to suffer and die because they can't afford to pay for healthcare. Like people's health and medication and stuff should be something guaranteed to every citizen. No one should have to die because they can't afford it. But with housing, that's a similar sort of thing. Housing is something that everyone needs. Having a like warm roof over your head, a bed, a fridge, like basic homing tools that's something that's someone's livelihood as well. Someone having a warm place to sleep is integral for like mental and physical well-being. But why is that not something that should be socialized? Why should it be a case that someone who's wealthier, someone who's lucky enough to be born rich, should have a better housing situation than someone who's just born poor and can't do anything about it? Why should people be trapped forever, like sort of renting scummy landlords, when like some people just get lucky and can just buy their way to the top? Like people shouldn't suffer simply because of like who, like the work, being a worker or being poor. Everyone should have a right to a home, and that's sort of the whole point of anti-capitalism. The idea that no, we shouldn't be having a society where profit is our prime motive, and anyone who's not lucky enough to be rich is just left to rot and like get by or not even get by. We should be having a society where everyone has a home, education, good health, good transportation. Everyone has a place in society because it's not impossible at all. And if we actually redistributed our sort of system and jigged the way we run our society, it would be like perfectly achievable. But to come back to sort of my main point, what I was saying to you just then, if you can see that healthcare is, you need to go and sort. No, it's okay. You need to go and sort out your dogs.
Yeah, they might start fighting. So okay, I think they stopped. So sorry.
Yeah. No problem. Yeah. So if you can see that healthcare is something that should be socialized, why can you not see the same thing for something else that's integral, like housing?
Yeah, I guess with housing is something that you need. So I guess I'll change my mind on that.
So yeah, well, good, good, well, that's good. But then like, there's more elements to it as well. Like, once you go beyond basic things like housing and education and healthcare, and remove the element of competition and profit in them, then why stop there? Why not see that any market that you allow to be profited off and to privatize and capitalize will always benefit those right at the top eventually. Some will take longer than others to become unequal and massively unfair, but people with wealth can essentially dictate the market. So, for instance, you can point to any market really and see how capitalism has affected it negatively. Like, look at films, for instance. You see Hollywood and wealthy producers essentially control which films you're going to see. And because, yeah, technically anyone can make a film, anyone can try and sell it, but you're like, no matter how good a film is, if you've got wealthy advertisers and if you've got more money, you can like always outsell and outperform them. Because I mean, who's gonna like find out about your film if every billboard is dominated by one or two film companies? If at your cinema you can't afford to get a screening there because you know it costs lots, and because wealthy corporations have driven the price of like a screening up loads, like there's no market to compete, which is why like acting as that like it's a very hard thing to get into because the market is so like upper like price. Video games is another one. Um, Companies like EA and Ubisoft and Activision and stuff like that, they can do essentially act how they like, knowing because they've got the wealth and the money, they're not going to be under threat from anyone. Which is why like EA are so like such an awful company, and everyone knows they're like dreadful. But they can still just act how they want because people like don't have the means of challenging them because they're so wealthy. And yeah, fine, there's indie games, but you know, like they're not all they're not really able to compete because you know it's lucky if your game gets recognition to the point where you're able to sort of spend loads of time on it. Like it's for every Undertale, like you know, a successful indie game, there's loads which are maybe as good or maybe like on the same sort of level, which never took off because they never got the attention. Meanwhile, EA can release like crappy, unfinished, messy games that like clearly didn't have anywhere near the effort put into them or talent as the indie game, but because it will always sell because they are such a massive commodity and massive force in the industry, they're never going to face retribution for it. It's why Konami can like you look at what Metal Gear's become. It's like a what coin machine game now. You look at Resident Evil, it's a joke, like just like a slot machine game. Um, and you essentially like, what can you do to improve that? Like, because Konami have all the licenses, and now these game series are ruined essentially because Konami can just like do as they please because they're a wealthy company, and money is all you need. And in a system that was fair, like socialism or communism, or a system that did not allow this sort of these sort of things to be going on, all of a sudden, like you see Metal Gear not ruined by Konami's greed. You see developers like Hideo Kojima not being fired because like they don't really like the direction the corporation is going, and instead you see one of the best developers in the world being able to make games with the like worlds he's helped craft and create. To cut a long story short, any industry that you allow capitalism to root itself into will end up with an unfair, disgraceful, and outright unequal system in which those who are at the top and who are wealthy can control and exert their dominance over the market. And if you can see that more important elements of society, like healthcare, like housing, transportation, are better off under an equal system than a private system, a publicly owned system than a capitalist system, then why can you not see that with everything else in society?
I guess because I think these companies have a right to, because it's their material. It's not like a house or something. It's not a need. It's a want.
But someone could say, "Oh, well, you don't have to live in your own house. You just live in these flats, and I own them. And you can pay me rent." Someone could make that argument for healthcare and housing and transportation, like we see in America today, like has already happened, really. Because I mean, you can look at the state of American healthcare, and people make that exact argument. Oh, well, if you want this service, you must pay for it. And obviously, as a consequence, lots of people die needlessly because of the like sheer mess American healthcare is in. Um, but like to say, oh well, you don't need to do this. And yeah, fine. You don't need to play video games. You don't need to watch films. You don't need to enjoy your life to live it. But there's no reason to have industries that lots of people can't access. Like imagine if everyone got to enjoy playing a video game or even own a video game. Imagine if everyone got to enjoy watching films, indulging in theatre and acting. Imagine if everyone who wanted to play a sport got to play a sport and had access to decent sorting facilities. Every element of enjoyment and facets of life could be improved and made accessible to everyone if we remove the system that prevents that ease of access and that improvement to the system. And you said, oh, well, it's their property, so, they should be able to do what they want with it. Um, well, again, it's like, is it their property or is it the property of the workers and the societal efforts to make the property? Like EA, for instance, lots of their games that they own, like the Sims, for instance, that wasn't originally theirs. That was, I think, Maxim or Maxis or something like that. But it wasn't their sort of conception. But obviously, they have a lot of money, so they just buy the company that owns the rights to the Sims. And hey, like suddenly, all of a sudden, they're in charge of it, and they add in their own like internet streaming system, Origin, I think, and it's like a mess. And the SimCity, most recent title in that series, was a complete disaster because of their like terrible servers and all the problems that you see in AAA games because they're so like driven by their need for profit, sort of manifest again and again. Um, and that's what happens when you essentially say, "Oh well, people who have wealth can just buy something and it's theirs," because you've essentially got a dominant system where there's no quality control, there's no real improvement, because corporations would rather have money than they would improve on the games they produce. And no one's sort of saying that, oh, once you make something, it's just everyone's. No one's saying that, oh, once you make this game, anyone can just edit it and do what you like to it. But what people are saying is that with, like, if you were going to use the example of video games, you shouldn't be able to have just these massive entities that are built off the labor of people dictating and dominating the games industry. Like, it's unhealthy for video games and for consumers and the inevitably benefit are the shareholders of EA, like, and they don't care if you don't like the video games because they've got the money and they're gonna have the money in 10, 20, 30 years time.
Okay. I, um. Well, I mean, are you saying that if it was under socialism, it would be under what Like what the people's demands for games? Like, is that what you're saying? I don't
Well,
feel like
sorry, were you going to say something?
no. I was just talking to myself, I guess.
So, for instance, if you imagine, like, say, Call of Duty, actually, no, Battlefield, for instance, because that's made by EA. Battlefield, the game, lots of people help make it, lots of people develop it, design it, and all their input all of a sudden counts. So you've got all these people in the video games industry, the workers who make the game, being able to contribute to how the game is formed and how the game is made. So all of a sudden, instead of just like the same things being put into the next game just to like sell more money, you've got a system where no, all of a sudden we can address the faults of the last game and spend time working on it. A system where you don't have to pay loads and loads for like the same content in the last game, just siphoned up in different parts. Suddenly it's just one game and you get it. And there's no like chicanery or shenanigans put in by a AAA company to make you get more money. Suddenly there's no like ridiculous online like system, um, like I don't know, an Xbox Live account, for instance, where you need to pay additional money just to use the online services. All of a sudden, it's just made better for the consumer. And when you remove the idea of profiting off people, making their experience worse unless they pay more, you have a system which everyone is able to access, everyone can enjoy, and that's a more productive one. All of a sudden, you've got more people using the system and more potential better ideas um, to come out of it. You've got a system in which it isn't just like five companies that can make a game which will sell loads and be really popular. Suddenly, anyone with a good idea has the opportunity to like actually get it off, get it going. Like imagine if just like under today's world, someone could have an amazing idea for a video game that everyone likes, but they've not got the wealth, they've not got the publicity, so it's never going to take off unless they're extremely lucky. All of a sudden, under a better system, where suddenly you don't have this massive wealth inequality, where it allows the people who are wealthy to be heard loudest, their good idea can be heard, and their ideas about how video games can be made get circulated around the society, and you've got a good video game that everyone can use instead of just another lost idea falling by the wayside, as we see under today's system. Like some of the best games out there may never be made because the people who think them don't have the audience for it. Um, and obviously, also you got to consider that like for every FIFA creator or a COD creator or every person who makes a good game from their own ingenuity, there's like what thousands more who never got the opportunity to spend time thinking about potential idea they could have had because they were trapped under like poverty or capitalist sort of wage slavery and the other miseries of capitalism. There's so many like people who could have done something like amazing for society who never got the chance to because capitalism handed them a terrible hand, terrible start to life, and they were never able to get anywhere. Um, and I think really that's another essential point of why anti-capitalism is so important because a system like capitalism, where you're born, where how you do in life is so like determined by luck essentially. Where if you're born wealthy, you're just lucky to have the wealth because you know you could have been born poor. There's no sort of differential between. There's no real way of determining how if you're rich or poor or not besides luck. Um, if we move on from that, we can have a society where everyone has the potential to contribute and everyone has the potential to make a really great idea. And perhaps more importantly, everyone has the right and the access to a happy, healthy life. No one is just born into poverty. Anyway, you can go.
I mean, I guess under capitalism, maybe I'm incorrect here. They could start their own business, and their game idea, can be flourished under capitalism because they'll be paid for their work. Uh, work.
But there's they like it's not like under socialism wouldn't be able to have their own idea. Like the idea of like a business, I know, an entity of workers, you know, that's not going to go away. All that's changing is that all of a sudden you're not going to be seeing people be able to exploit their workers by profiting off them. So instead of like whoever owns EA having billions, while the people who did the work received nothing, it's like people at imagine if EA still has the same title. EA would be a collective of workers who all receive um, the fruits of their labor. So instead of like in a video game when like you see all the credits coming up and like it's I don't know graphics developer, developing team, all those sort of titles you sort of just skim over. All those people who contributed to the game um, sort of own the wealth of the EA, which is sort of spread out evenly. And all of a sudden, you don't need to have this massive disparity between the people on top who have the wealth and the people at the bottom who don't. So if like I don't know, Jim Blogs wants to make his video game, he's got the platform to do so regardless of his starting position in life, because there's a ground for anyone to have a chance to succeed because everyone has the same wealth equality. There's no longer a poverty barrier and a wealth barrier to success. Um, so the idea that he wouldn't be able to even start a business or start his idea off is, I think, a little bit ludicrous because it sort of ignores the processes that would be removed from capitalism. And the idea that anyone can start their business under capitalism itself is a bit of a lie. I mean, like technically you could start a business, but you're going to have no money to do so. You're going to have no platform to do so. It's not going to go anywhere, and you're going to do more harm to yourself than good. So, like, who's going to do it? Instead, you're going to be trapped working your minimum wage, probably job or low paying job, barely getting by, having to spend all your money that you have spare after food and rent on, like, keeping it safe just in case there's a medical emergency. Um, and like that's the reality for most people under capitalism. And even worse, if you aren't in the West, if you're in another part of the world that capitalism is even worse for, like you can forget even thinking about like video games or like dreaming about other stuff because you're trapped in a job that you can't really leave because you're sort of forced into working there in the first place by the conditions that capitalism has. You might even be born in to that sort of workplace because a lot of the sort of working conditions in that part of the world have been so bad that like essentially communities form out of just working at the um, labor areas. Um, and that's not a good thing. And their ideas they could have had are gone. So yeah, it's capitalism. There's no room for those people to have their own ideas, have their own business, have even like a sort of conceptual idea because all their efforts have been drained and going into a certain sector of society. Um, so I think all these like lies and sort of like mistruths about how free capitalism is need to be sort of exposed for what they are, which is like the truth is that if you're wealthy, you have the freedom to do what you like because you've got the wealth and power. If you're poor, you need luck, and if you don't have luck, then you're not going to get anywhere because you can work as hard as you like. If you're not wealthy, then what are you going to do? Nothing.
All right. So I guess since it's almost been an hour, I guess I could do it. Thanks if you want to, but it's been a good discussion. Thanks for having me. If you,
Oh no, not a problem. I mean, I feel a little bit bad actually. I feel like I've spoken for far longer than I ought to have. Um,
oh, it's all right.
I mean,
I've seen your debates. You're an intelligent guy. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Where you talk because you have something to say. So
well, thank you. I mean, you're hardly unintelligent. I mean, I think just because I speak more doesn't mean that like that just proves my like intelligence or anything. I mean, I think perhaps maybe next time we should pick a sort of more specific topic, and maybe we should like focus on that topic rather than sort of delineating between different ones.
yeah,
Because then we can sort of come into it with like a direct focus. But if
yeah,
you want to sort of draw a conclusion, then yeah, sure, I'm fine to do that.
yeah. Is it okay also if I do an aftermath stream where I have people on that have watched it and
Oh, of course, yeah. No, of course, you do what you like with your own channel. Like, it'd be silly of me to sort of say no. You are banned from even talking about this once we're done. No, go ahead, definitely.
I guess the conclusion is we talked about socialism, capitalism. We talked about feminism. It was a pretty good topic slash debate.
Yeah, sure. And do you think that you've sort of changed any of your like, opinions, or do you think you've largely got the same outlook on stuff that you do did when you came into it.
Yeah, I do think that at least like maybe you shouldn't have the mansion, but at least a house. So you know
Hmm.
what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, pleasure having you on.
Pleasure having you here too.
So to all of the people who are kind enough to watch, thank you for watching today. And we'll see you all next time. Hopefully for another debate.
Yeah, maybe if you want to do it tomorrow, that's fine, but probably not. Yeah, not that I
We'll
won't
we'll,
be
we'll
there.
see. I
I
mean,
don't know. I don't know
uh,
if you want to do it at 12 o'clock again.
we'll see,
Yeah,
won't we? Anyway,
yeah.
thank you everyone for watching.
All right.